بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون وفوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن الناس من يشري نفسه ابتغاء مرضات الله صدق الله العلي العظيم. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all of you across the globe. Question: who is Ali ibn Abi Talib? Salawatullah salamu alayh. When we came to this position of analyzing the commander of the faithful, Ali ibn Abi Talib, the cousin of the Prophet, the son-in-law of the Prophet, the brother of the Prophet, from his own words, we sat on this conversation a few nights ago and said, where does one begin to analyze Ali ibn Abi Talib? We said that those people who are not Muslims, those people who are Orientalists, those people who are historians, those people who are professors, those people who are academics, who had dedicated their lives to studying the Eastern civilizations, the Middle East, looking at Islam and its history, not from the lens of Muslims, not from the lens of the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, but from secular lenses, from Orientalist lenses, from lenses that are not Islamic. What did they say about Ali ibn Abi Talib? What was their viewpoint of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib? That when we looked at the words of Edward Gibbon, the famous historian, who wrote the famous works, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, a renowned works that is known the world over. He said this person, Ali, he comprised and brought together the traits of a soldier, a saint, and a poet all in one. And furthermore, he was that reliance, he was that friend, that generous friend that the Holy Prophet had at every moment in his life. From the start of his mission up until his death, funeral, that was all performed by Ali ibn Abi Talib. And he said that this was, using the prophetic tradition, that this was an Aaron to this Moses, referring to the Holy Prophet and referring to Imam Ali as Aaron. And then we further said, for example, Professor Hitti at Princeton University, who was a professor of Semitic languages, looking at the life and times of Ali ibn Abi Talib, he said he was valiant in battle. He was eloquent in speech, wise in counsel. And he began to continue that he was true to his friends and he was magnanimous to his foes. Anyone perhaps can be true to their friends, but who is magnanimous to their foes, which we'll see in just a moment with respect to what is being meant there and what's being said there. How was he magnanimous to his foes? And he continued saying about the personality of Ali that he had both the traits that the Arabs loved more than any other and they held in the highest esteem: nobility and chivalry. He came from the best lineage and he had the greatest bravery. And he said, with respect to Ali ibn Abi Talib, Professor Hitti at Princeton, he says he's that person who was the Solomon of the Arabs. Solomon in Christianity, Solomon in the Bible is known as that individual as Solomon the Wise. This was Ali ibn Abi Talib for the Arabs. And we highlighted Khalil Gibran, the Christian, the Lebanese American Christian poet who wrote The Prophet, after Shakespeare, the greatest work of poetry in the English language. This individual said that it is my belief, his belief, that Ali was the first Arab to have a conversation with the universal soul, with the universal spirit. And he was that individual who died a martyr of his greatness with prayer between his two lips. And it was not until amongst his neighbors, the Persians, emerged some individuals who could tell the difference between gravel and gems, that his value was realized, his words. But this Ali ibn Abi Talib, we must understand that he is a global persona and he's someone that should not be limited just to Islamic or Muslim circles. Rather, if you and I help to cultivate, help to move, help to share the message, the mission, the vision of Ali ibn Abi Talib, you will find our world will benefit greatly, and they will take him with both hands, and they will rush towards Ali ibn Abi Talib's personality. Why? Because our world is starving for leadership today. Ethical leadership, true leadership, leadership that does not compromise on principles, leadership that is actually espousing to look after the needs and wants and all of the necessities of the most downtrodden of society. Ali ibn Abi Talib, in his just under 5 years, in 4.5 years, 4 years, 9 months, where he was ruling over the Muslim nation, he didn't make everyone the wealthiest people in the world. But what he made sure was that he tried to make sure that no one went to sleep hungry. And we still cannot say this in developed economies around the world, whether that be, for example, in the likes of Japan to the United States and everywhere in between. You will find that there are still people in our own backyards who go to sleep hungry, let alone the hunger that exists in Africa and India and other places that are underdeveloped. This reality of Ali ibn Abi Talib, he was saying that make sure that you have opportunities for the people who are most marginalized. Make sure that they are not marginalized. Make sure that everyone's taken care of. Therefore, tonight, in the brief moments that we have together, I want to look at a few dimensions of the personality of Ali ibn Abi Talib so that we can understand who this person is and understand and extract some gems of wisdom from his life so we can implement it in our own lives. Firstly, I want to look at some aspects of Ali ibn Abi Talib being highlighted in the Quran for all Muslims, because there has been a dynamic shift in terms of the way the world sees, the Muslim world at first sees Ali ibn Abi Talib. And the way that he was seen in the past compared to the way that he is seen today may be very different. We need to highlight this and understand the position of Ali ibn Abi Talib. What was Ali ibn Abi Talib's position in the battlefield, for example, and how important is that? And what were some of the statements that were stated on the battlefield that highlight the immense importance of Ali ibn Abi Talib? Then I want to look at Ali ibn Abi Talib's political leadership, how he led as a political leader and a socio-economic leader. What was his vision and how we can learn lessons from it in order to drive it in our own world, in our own lives. And the fourth element, I want to look at how Ali ibn Abi Talib has helped, is helping, and will help and continue to help you and I in this day and age and in this time. How is that possible? And I want to look at what happened on this night. That is the night where the holy soul of Amir al-Mu'mineen departed towards the heavens, towards his Lord, his creator. What was going through his heart? What was on his mind? And what was on the heart and mind of his family? These are the 5 elements that I want to consider in the brief moments that we have together. The first element I want to look at is Ali ibn Abi Talib. That why was he exalted? Why was he someone who is revered most after Rasulullah, after the Holy Prophet? And when we look at this question, the first thing that comes forward is Ali ibn Abi Talib, for example, in the Quran. According to Muslims, Shia and Sunni, Ahl Sunnah as well as Ahl Tashayyu, those people have come forward, and let's look at it from the perspective of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. The scholars of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah highlight that at least 300 verses of the Quran al-Majid wal Furqan al-Hamid were revealed in honor of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Whether it's the verse with him giving the zakat in the state of ruku, the only person in history to do such and the only person to receive this gift and bestowment, this is that individual. Or for example, the verse that I recited at the beginning of my lecture and my talk, where we're told that Rasulullah, he is making the migration from Mecca towards Medina. He's making the movement from Mecca towards Medina, the hijrah, that movement that marked the beginning of the Islamic calendar. At that moment in time, when he makes this movement, we're told that at one moment in time, Rasulullah begins to go forward. And when he begins to proceed, he tells Ali ibn Abi Talib that, Ya Ali, stay back. You will stay back here, and I want you to bring with you the women folk, bring with them with you. And number 2, there are some things that I have left behind that are the trusts of the non-Muslims, not the Muslims, of the non-Muslims. I want you to ensure that you take this and you return this back to them, and then you come to Medina and join me. When he said this, at that very historic moment, we're told that another conversation ensued at the same time. What was that conversation? That conversation was where Rasulullah says to Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, Ya Ali, I have a request of you. He says, what is the request, Ya Rasulullah? I am at your service. Anything you tell me, I'm there at your service. He says, I need you to sleep in my bed while I go in the middle of the night. I won't be there. I need you to sleep in my place. The people will be looking for me. The Quraysh, the Meccans will be looking for me. They will try to harm me, but I need you to sleep in my place so they don't speculate anything. And I will go towards Medina. Amir al-Mu'mineen, as you know, used to spend the whole night awake in prayer. For someone who spends the whole night awake, it's very difficult to actually sleep. You can imagine. Nonetheless, the Imam asked one question, Amir al-Mu'mineen. What was that question? He said, Ya Rasulullah, if I sleep in this place, will your life be saved? He said, Yes, Ya Ali, my life will be saved if you do this. At that point in time, he asked no further questions. And historians say he slept such a sleep that no one has ever seen Ali ibn Abi Talib sleep before. When the enemy had drawn their swords and they were coming towards attacking the bed of Rasulullah, thinking Rasulullah was sleeping there, they removed the cloth and they noticed it was Ali. At that point in time, they said, Ya Ali, where is Muhammad? He said, did you leave him in my trust and my amana that I should know where he is? That moment, he was not dishonest. He asked him a sincere question. What is it? What is the matter? Did you leave him in my trust? At that point in time, he gave everything. He was willing to sacrifice his life, Ali ibn Abi Talib, to the point that the Quran said, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَشْرِي نَفْسَهُ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ. Amongst men are those who sell their nafs, who sell their soul to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of the rida of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is Ali ibn Abi Talib in the Quran. In the famous tradition and the famous verse of Mubahila, where Anfusana wa Anfusakum is mentioned, Rasulullah takes Ali ibn Abi Talib. Furthermore, at Ghadir, Man kuntu mawlah fahada aliyun mawlah. This statement that Rasulullah gave with respect to, and in the Quran it stated, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum deenakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa raditu lakum al-Islam deena. That on this day I have perfected your religion. Which day? When Ali ibn Abi Talib is clearly appointed in front of all of the people, over 120,000 people, to witness. At that point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, before he says, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum, he says, Ya ayyuha rasul balligh, Ya ayyuha rasul balligh ma unzila ilayka min rabbik. Fa in lam taf'al, فما بلغت رسالة. Ali ibn Abi Talib at every moment is in the Quran al-Majid wal Furqan al-Hamid, and his status should not be marginalized by any. Why do I say this? Because if you look at the history of Islam, if you look at the period of history, if you look at, for example, in certain parts of the world, in parts of the Middle East, maybe in parts of the Persian Gulf, for example, and in parts of the Indian subcontinent, for example, whenever somebody used to say, not Shias, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, our brothers in Ahl Sunnah, 10, maybe not 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, maybe 40 years ago, maybe 50 years ago. But before that, every moment in time, at least before the 90s, before the 80s, before the 60s, before these eras, whenever somebody used to use the name of Ali ibn Abi Talib as compared to another companion, how would they address other companions? For example, they would say Salman radiyallahu ta'ala an. They would say, for example, Abu Dharr radiyallahu ta'ala an. For example, they would say Ammar bin Yasir radiyallahu ta'ala an. They would say, may Allah be pleased with them. May Allah be pleased with them. May Allah be pleased with them. After every companion. But Ali ibn Abi Talib, according to all Muslims, before this, for example, this fitna or this fasad that has emerged in the last few decades, before that, they always used to say, Ali karramallahu wajha. May Allah brighten his face. May Allah illuminate his face. Why? When you would ask the scholars of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, whenever you would ask them, they would say, Ali karramallahu wajha. Why? May Allah illuminate his face. May Allah brighten his face. Why? Because they would say, he was that one companion who never for one moment in his life bowed down before idols. Ever. You couldn't say this about other companions. This was Ali ibn Abi Talib. Therefore, they kept that position. Now there's a new narrative. What is that narrative? They would say, for example, that Ali is good, but there's also this other companion. Number one, number two, number three. These are also good companions. What about them? Hold on a minute. When I'm talking about someone's greatness, when I'm talking about someone's grandeur, and I'm talking about someone's respect and honor that Rasulullah has laid out about Ali ibn Abi Talib, why are you bringing up so-and-so? Why are you bringing X, Y, and Z? That means that either you have animosity towards Ali ibn Abi Talib, or you have insecurity with respect to the others. Which one is it? Because the reality of the matter is, when we're talking about the fadail, when we're talking about the status of Ali ibn Abi Talib, one thing is clear and categorical, and that is, according to all Muslims, there is a separate position for Ali ibn Abi Talib after Rasulullah and everyone else after Rasulullah. If you don't believe me, don't take my word for it. For example, take the words of Imam Nasa'i, for example, Sunan and Nasa'i. If you look at our brothers in Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they will have the books that they are called the Sahih al-Sitta, according to their views. That is Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, for example, Muslim, Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal. All of these books, for example. One of the books you will find is Nasa'i. When you find the book of Nasa'i, at that point in time, who was Nasa'i? Nasa'i was an Imam of Shia? No, of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. What happened? He wrote a book, Khasa'is Amir al-Mu'mineen. He wrote a book that is the attributes, the virtues, the merits of Ali ibn Abi Talib. When he writes this book, at that point in time, some people who were sympathizers of Muawiyah came to know. They said, you've written this book about Ali ibn Abi Talib. Yes. He said that we need you to write a book like this, just like it, but for who? For Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. This man, who was a righteous scholar, although he was Ahl Sunnah, he was someone who had at least integrity. He had justice. He had some belief and truth. He said, I cannot write a book like this about any other companion of Rasulullah, let alone someone like Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. Are you serious? He said, write it. He said, no. He said, write it. He said, where do I bring these traditions from? They don't exist for Muawiyah. This is only for Ali ibn Abi Talib. They said, write it. Up until the point he said, I cannot do it. They began to beat him and beat him and beat him up until the point that he bled to death and he died in that state. Was this a Shia scholar? This was not a Shia scholar. This was a scholar of Ahl Sunnah. What I'm telling my dear brothers in Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, revive and understand and learn what was the vision of the scholars of Ahl Sunnah in the past with respect to the personality of Ali ibn Abi Talib. When you understand this, you will then know that Ali ibn Abi Talib is not an ordinary companion. His dhikr is littered, is at every moment mentioned throughout the Quran al-Majid wal Furqan al-Hamid. Whether you realize it or not, read the tafsir, you'll find out. In the history of Islam, his name and his banner is always the highest. What example? I can give dozens of examples. I gave Badr the other night, for example, Uhud the other night. If you go further, for example, you'll look at Khandaq and Khaybar. Let's look at Khandaq for a moment. What happened in Khandaq? Really briefly, what happened at that moment in time? On the other side, there's a moment in time where Rasulullah is gathered with his companions. When he's gathered with his companions, he's laying out a principle. What's the principle? He says, does anyone have any advice with respect to our military strategy? The idea that Rasulullah has divine knowledge and he knows what to do and what not to do. But he's stopping and he's asking his friends, he's asking his companions, I should say, that do you have any advice that we should take on board, perhaps that we can get more success? So he said, a leader, principle of leadership, a leader should not be reluctant to take advice from others, number one, and explore other opportunities. Salman al-Farsi, we're told, or Salman Muhammadi comes forward and says, Ya Rasulullah, where I come from, we dig a trench, a moat around us to protect us, in the front, in the back, on the sides, so that no enemy can jump over and attack us. So there's a protection. Rasulullah says this is a good idea. At that point in time, they all order for the trench to be made. At the same time, on the other side, the opposition side, is a man by the name of Amr ibn Wadd al-Amiri, is a person who has an animosity and a wretchedness, and he had an arrogance about him. When he had this arrogance about him, he began to call out and scream out to the Arabs on the other sides, or the people, for example, who are leading the battalions on the Muslim side. He began to call out to the Muslims that I am that person, and I am shouting up until the point that I've lost my voice. Amr ibn Abdul Wad says. He says that your Muhammad says that if I kill you, you go to Jannah, you go to paradise. And if you kill me, you will also go to paradise. That is, that if I am killed, you will be someone who is a victor. And at the same time, if I kill you, you will be a martyr. So what do you have to lose? You only have to gain. Therefore, he began to taunt the Muslims. At that point in time, Rasulullah gave the very famous statement. He says, Man lihadha al-kalb. He says that who will answer this dog? Who will reply to this dog? Rasulullah is attributed to have said this. Rasulullah, who is the height of makarimul akhlaq, the height of akhlaq. There are two types of akhlaq. Akhlaq which is called mahasin al-akhlaq, and akhlaq which is called makarim al-akhlaq. Mahasin al-akhlaq is that akhlaq that I do expecting someone to do good back to me. That, for example, I give someone a gift expecting they'll give me a gift back. This is mahasin. Makarim al-akhlaq is that akhlaq that whether the person does good to me, bad to me, doesn't matter. I only do it because it's the right thing to do. Rasulullah, the Quran is saying, the traditions are saying that Rasulullah is the epitome of akhlaq on this earth. This one is using such language, that means that that person is one of the most vile creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this earth. Not to say that, for example, that there's anything wrong with dogs. They are the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he's calling a human being that creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That means that there's something more to this, which will be seen in a moment. Bear with us. What is that moment? That moment is when Ali ibn Abi Talib rises and he says, Ya Rasulullah, I will take this man on. I will take on Amr ibn Abdul Wad. He says, very well, Ya Ali. Amir al-Mu'mineen goes. When Amir al-Mu'mineen goes, at that point in time, he begins to fight with Amr ibn Abdul Wad. When he begins to fight with Amr ibn Abdul Wad, there is a narration that Amr ibn Abdul Wad strikes Amir al-Mu'mineen on his head. And it was that strike that struck Amir al-Mu'mineen's helmet, which he actually harmed his head. That is the same strike which Ibn Muljam, Abdurrahman ibn Muljam, attacked when he actually struck the head of Ali ibn Abi Talib. That's why he was able to pierce through the head of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Nonetheless, when Amir al-Mu'mineen got this strike, he was then able to get his strength again together, and then he struck him, and he attacked Amr ibn Abdul Wad with all of the strength. At that point in time, Ali ibn Abi Talib overcame him and he became victorious. When Ali ibn Abi Talib became victorious, the Muslims won and took the banner of Islam and took the banner of victory. But this is not the main point. The statement which came on the issuance of the battle of Khandaq, at the battle of Khandaq, of Ali ibn Abi Talib, with respect to Ali ibn Abi Talib, that is what history narrates and history writes down. What is that statement? That barad al-imanu kullu ala kufri kullih, that all of iman, kull of iman, the totality of iman has gone to fight all of kufr. Or furthermore, ضربة علي يوم الخندق أفضل من عبادة الثقلين, that the strike of Ali on the day of Khandaq is afdal, is greater than the strike and the ibadah and the worship of the two worlds. That is the universes. That is the strike of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Why? Because it was a strike of pure sincerity. It was a strike of pure justice. It was a strike of absolute truth. But I want to mention and highlight what happened after this. The tradition of the Arabs, the custom of the Arabs, at least the enemy was that whenever they used to finish off the enemy, whenever they used to annihilate the enemy, they would also loot and plunder the body. They would loot and plunder the armor. They would loot and plunder the sword. They would loot and plunder the rings. They would loot and plunder and leave the body dismembered, and they would leave the body without any covering. When the sister of Amr ibn Abdul Wad al-Amiri passed by his body, typically the tradition was that you would lament and cry over the deceased loved one, your brother. At that moment, we're told that when this happened, the sister of Amr ibn Abdul Wad, she looked at the body and she notices that the armor is on the body. And she was astonished because it was a very expensive armor. At that point in time, she says, my brother Amr ibn Wad, I would cry for you. I would mourn for you. I would weep for you. But I see that a Kareem has killed you, has slain you, one who did not remove your armor from your body. Who is this individual? Allahu Akbar. That at one moment, that the closest person to someone may perhaps be for a brother, the sister. And this sister is saying, I will not cry for you. Amr, why? Because the person who has killed you is a Kareem, is someone who is generous, someone who is of high morality, who's left you in this state. This is not an ordinary individual. This is Ali ibn Abi Talib, who has slain Amr, that even the enemy begins to say the praise of Ali ibn Abi Talib. I say this because one of the things that people say is that Ali was not ready. The third element that we come to, Ali was not ready for political leadership. They say he was not prepared. What were some of the allegations that they came forward with respect to Ali ibn Abi Talib? Do you know what is some of the things that they said? They said about Ali ibn Abi Talib. They said with Amir al-Mu'mineen, do you know what they said? They said that he was, for example, too young. This was one thing that they said. He was 33 at the times of the death of Rasulullah. He's too young, number one. Number two, do you know what they said with respect to Ali ibn Abi Talib? They said with respect to Ali ibn Abi Talib that he smiles too much. He has too much of a pleasant demeanor. A pleasant demeanor, too much smiling. Do you know that Allah loves the smile of Ali ibn Abi Talib? How? Ayatullah Wahid al-Khurasani, may Allah protect him, he narrates a tradition with respect to Ali ibn Abi Talib and Jannah. What? He says that in Jannah there is a narration that he narrates. Ayatullah Wahid al-Khurasani, one of the great marjas of our time, one of the people who is leading the Hawza al-Ilmi of Qum, one of the students of Najaf, one of the people who is a contemporary of Sayyid Sistani, one of the great ulama. This alim is saying at one moment in time that the people of Jannah will see a sun emerge, the sun which gives you and I light, that allows the crops to rise, that allows for life to exist on earth. That sun will emerge in Jannah. When that sun emerges in paradise, the people of Jannah, Ahlul Jannah, the people of the paradise, will address Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they will say, my Lord, our Lord, you said that there will be no sun in this world, in this Jannah, in this paradise. Why? Because there's no time in Jannah. Jannah, for example, in paradise, there's no time. So why would there be day and night? Why would there be the sun and the moon? Why is this there? And therefore they are saying that why is it and how is it that there is a sun within paradise? How is it possible, O Lord, O Creator? At that point in time, they are told this is not the sun. Rather, what you perceive as the sun, it is in fact that the lips and the teeth of my wali, Ali, have begun to smile. That is, Ali ibn Abi Talib has smiled, and the rays from the lips and the teeth and the smile of Ali ibn Abi Talib have manifested in Jannah in the form of what you perceive as the sun. This was the smile and the power of the smile of Ali ibn Abi Talib, according to Ayatollah Wahid al-Khurasani. And yet people came forward and say that Ali ibn Abi Talib smiled too much. Allahu Akbar. Ali, many people came forward and said that Ali was not ready for political leadership. Why? They said, for example, he was not flexible. He was not negotiable. He was not somebody who was willing to bend the rules. Meaning, if he had done a few things, he could have saved the Muslim world from many troubles. He could have saved the Muslim world from many arguments. He could have saved the Muslim world from many strifes. He could have saved the Muslim world from many problems. But he didn't. They said, for example, if he had given Amr ibn As, the son of As ibn Wa'il, if he had given Amr ibn As, the one who played a terrible role in Karbala and Kufa and Sham, this one who was a henchman of Yazid, Amr ibn As, he said if he had given him Egypt, a lot of the problem would have been solved. If he gave Talha and Zubair their region, if he had given them that, then he would have been okay. Furthermore, if he had given other people their localities and regions, and he would have been a little bit flexible, and he had given Muawiyah Sham and Damishq, he would have given Levant to Muawiyah, a lot of the problems could have been solved. When people come forward and say this, they don't understand the dynamics of the vision of Ali ibn Abi Talib in terms of leadership. How? Ali ibn Abi Talib, when we come to analyze Ali ibn Abi Talib as a leader, we look at the words and the works of Sayyid al-Hakim. Sayyid Ali al-Hakim highlights this, and he says, first and foremost, when we look at Ali ibn Abi Talib and Muawiyah, for example, the comparison that people love to do, because after the assassination of Uthman, after his death, after Uthman, on one side was Ali ibn Abi Talib, he took over the leadership of the Muslim nation. But at the same time, Muawiyah had taken up the Levant, Syria, Sham, and he had taken up that region and he had begun to take over that region. So on one side is Ali ibn Abi Talib over the Muslim nation, on the other side in the Levant, in Sham, is Muawiyah. So they say Ali and Muawiyah is a comparison. Some people try to bring this forward. So the Hakim says, hold on a second. Whenever we compare two things, we must make sure that the comparison is a fair comparison. The comparison is an even grounded comparison. The comparison is on common ground. For example, if I say that building A is compared to building B, this is a fair comparison, perhaps. If I say that bridge A and bridge B, a bridge that connects two locations over water, for example, bridge A and bridge B, there's a comparison between the two, that may be fair. If I say, for example, but there's a comparison and I begin to compare building A with bridge B, is this a fair comparison? It is not, because one is a building, one is a bridge. They have different purposes. This is what is called in engineering and, for example, in other fields, a comparison in technology as well. This idea, or in society in general, an apples to apples comparison and not an apples to oranges comparison. Why? Because the there is no commonality in the vision of Ali ibn Abi Talib and Muawiyah. Why? Because the vision of Muawiyah was to obtain power for power's sake. He wanted power as an end. He wanted to do whatever it took to get into power. Ali ibn Abi Talib was not interested in power for power's sake. Rather, Ali ibn Abi Talib saw power, he saw the seat as a tool in order to be able to establish justice. The end goal of Muawiyah was power. The end goal of Ali ibn Abi Talib was justice. And those two cannot be compared. We're told that Ali ibn Abi Talib's sole goal in life was to establish justice on earth as the Imam. So how do you and I compare these individuals? Furthermore, the level of equity, the level of fairness, the level of justice of Ali ibn Abi Talib was such, when you look at it, when Umar had appointed, as one example, Umar had appointed, the second Khalifa had appointed Amr ibn As as the ruler of Egypt, as the governor of Egypt. At this point in time, after Umar died, Uthman became the Khalifa. When Uthman became the Khalifa, we are told at this moment in time that there is a complaint against Umar ibn As that is sent to Uthman that says that Uthman was an individual, that Amr ibn As was an individual who was actually somebody who misappropriated funds. He was not using funds appropriately. When Uthman heard about what Amr ibn As did, he removed him of the position. When he removed him of the position, at that point in time, he went back. After some political turmoil, he then reinstated, we're told. And then when Uthman died, Amr ibn As left again Egypt and he was no longer the governor because Ali ibn Abi Talib would not permit this. We're told he went back to what's modern day Palestine in this area and he had some lands and property there, and that's where he began to sit and stay. When he began to sit and stay in this region, we're told that when this happened, when Ali ibn Abi Talib came to the leadership and he came to the position of leadership, we're told that Amr ibn As has a dialogue with his two sons. What dialogue does he have? He has a dialogue with son A and son B. The first son says that, my father, you should do one thing. You should go and you should become somebody who goes under the banner of Ali ibn Abi Talib. The other son came forward and said, no, my father, you should go under the banner of Muawiyah. At that point in time, one son said, under Ali ibn Abi Talib. Why? Because if you follow Ali ibn Abi Talib in this dunya, in this world, then you will benefit in the akhirah. And then at the other son, at the other moment says, my father, if you follow Muawiyah and you join Muawiyah's forces, he says to Amr ibn As, that you will benefit in this dunya. What did he say? The father, Amr ibn As. Notice, this is the son of As ibn Wa'il, the one who taunted Rasulullah. Therefore, Surah Al-Kawthar was revealed at that point in time, that he called Rasulullah Abtar. His son, Amr ibn As, who played that role in Karbala, in Kufa and Sham. At that point in time, do you know what he states? His statement tells what's in his heart with respect to his belief. He looks forward and he looks at both of his sons. He says, you've advised me according to your ability. He says at that point in time, my sons, he says that dunya, that world is credit. And this dunya is cash. Therefore, it is better to take cash. Therefore, I go for Muawiyah. This person who didn't believe in that truth of the akhirah, this person is becoming the rulers of the Muslims. That Abu Sufyan had clearly said, the lineage of Muawiyah, the Umayyads, the founder, he says, my children, make sure that you do everything to make sure that power continues in your generation. For verily there is no heaven and there is no hell. Hasha lillah. The same poetry was reflected by Yazid after the tragedy of Karbala, where he said, La'ibat Hashim bil mulk, wala khabarun wala ja'a nazal. He said that this Banu Hashim, they just played and orchestrated an act, a theatrical play, so to speak. That there was no wahi, there was no khabar, there was no nuzul, there was no wahi, there was no Jibreel, there was no command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hasha lillah. That's what he was saying. He was making a mockery of Islam. This Muawiyah, you compare him with Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahu salamu alayhi. Who Ali? Which Ali? This Ali who at every moment wanted to make sure that the downtrodden of society are taken care of. That Ali ibn Abi Talib. You compare apples to apples. You compare, for example, the mindset and the methodology of Rasulullah to Amir al-Mu'mineen, because Amir al-Mu'mineen only learned from Rasulullah. Perhaps that is acceptable. But Muawiyah, Imam Nasai even understood, which I just explained a few moments ago. Imam Nasai even understood that there's no comparison between Ali ibn Abi Talib and Muawiyah. Therefore, I invite all of our brothers in Islam, Shia Sunni alike, revive the tradition of other scholars, at least of Ahl Sunnah, where when they would say Ali ibn Abi Talib, they would say Karramallahu wajha, may Allah illuminate his face. Not that they would say Ali radiallahu ta'ala an, as if he was another companion like any other. Ali ibn Abi Talib is Ali ibn Abi Talib. But Ali ibn Abi Talib, coming to the fourth element, Amir al-Mu'mineen is that person who helps you and I in this dunya. You may not realize it. That Ali ibn Abi Talib. Why Najaf? Why the Hawza al-Ilmi of Najaf al-Ashraf? Why the scholars? I remember I was in the presence of Ayatollah Hafiz Bashir al-Najafi in Najaf al-Ashraf, amongst some other brothers and our scholars and speakers, for example. And when we were sitting there, he said that this Najaf, I cannot tell you of the bounties, the blessings, the knowledge of Amir al-Mu'mineen that is imparted. It is as if the grace of Ali ibn Abi Talib is covering the city of Najaf. And I tell you, if you look at the lives of the scholars, you will notice this. We're told there's a moment in time where Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, he's going with some of his companions. When he's going with some of his companions, we're told at a moment in time, some children, they ask for some help. They come towards the Sayyid and they say they need some help with mathematics. Imagine a scholar who has a very busy schedule in writing and learning and teaching. Some children stop him and say, we need some help with mathematics. When they say this at that point in time, we're told that Sayyid, he stopped his guards, he stopped his entourage, and he said, I will help these students. He helped them in their mathematics, and he helped them up until the point that they were satisfied with the answers. When they were satisfied with the answers, we're told that they asked the secret, or once the secret was asked of Sayyid Sadr, what is it that allowed you to get to this level of knowledge and intellect? He says, I tell you, it is nothing other than my 2 rak'ah salah that I consistently recite to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the Lord, to the Creator, and I gift the thawab to this man, pointing to the dharih and the shrine of Ali ibn Abi Talib. It is because of this individual, Ali ibn Abi Talib, and the doors of knowledge, that this Bab-e Madinatul Ilm, the gate of the city of knowledge, opens in my mind, that I'm able to derive the insights of falsafatuna, of our philosophy, of iqtisaduna, our economics, of all the other works that I've been able to do. It's because of this personality who guides my thoughts, my insights, and my personality. This is one individual. Furthermore, who else? Allama Tabatabai, Sahib Tafsir al-Mizan. Allama Tabatabai says that when I entered into Najaf, I was a student. And as a student, there were difficulties that ensued, financial difficulties. One time, the financial difficulty, I was normally patient, Allama says, but this situation got so difficult, it got so dire, it got so tumultuous. When it got so difficult and so dire, I went to the Dharih of Amir al-Mu'mineen in Najaf. When I went to the Dharih of Amir al-Mu'mineen, I had a hurt and a pain in my heart that I have been studying and I've been dedicating my life to knowledge and wisdom through the Hawza. And I have to suffer financially, I have to suffer economically. He says, I went to the Dhari of Amir al-Mu'mineen, I said, Ya Ali, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. And I said in a stern voice, he says, that I said, you left us alone? How could you leave me alone? That I dedicated my whole life to you, and my family is suffering, my family is hungry, my family is starving. He said, I said this, I turned around and I went home. When I began to go home, at once my heart felt regret. At once my heart felt sorrow. At once my heart felt as if I should not have said what I said. I let this situation overcome me. I should have patience. I should trust Amir al-Mu'mineen. I should trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, I felt this and I felt into a deep regret. He said, a few moments passed. When I got home, I heard a knock on the door. I had put my head down to rest. I heard a knock on the door. When I heard a knock on the door opened. I said, Salamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam. At that point in time, a man took a bag and he put it and he placed it in front of me. When he took it and he placed it in front of me, he put it there and he said that he has sent this for you. He says, who? He says, your Imam has sent this for you. And he sent a statement for you. He said, what's the statement? He says that in 18 years, Ya Allama Tabatabai, in 18 years, when did we leave you alone? And he left that for me and he left on his way. At that point in time, I opened the bag and I noticed it was some wealth, some money to help me. I began to cry and I began to weep because the statement that I uttered in front of Amir al Mu'mineen, I felt regret and sorrow. At that point, because I heard the statement that Ali had sent for me, when have we left you alone? When have we neglected you? For 18 years we've been looking after you, that you have food on your table, that your family and your children are looked after. Have we ever neglected you? Ya Muhammad Hussein Tabatabai. He said, I regretted this. But then he said, I began to think, how is it possible that for 18 years they've been assisting me? Because I've only been in Najaf for 9 years. He was 35 at the time. I was only in Najaf for 9 years. He said he thought about it, he thought about it, and he thought about it up until the point in the moment in time where he remembered it had been exactly 18 years to the day that he had begun to wear the amama, the aba, and the qaba, and the saya, and the dress of the scholars of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the dress of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the scholars themselves. He said, from that moment, the Ahlul Bayt and Amir al Mu'mineen were looking after me and looking after my interests. This Amir al Mu'mineen who helps Alama Tabatabai, Shahid al Sadr, for example, Ayatullah Bashir al Najafi, and the scholars down the line. This Amir al Mu'mineen has the ability and will help you and I in our difficulties and in the difficult times in our lives. If we have this connection with the Imam, if we have this relationship with the Imam, we are told on a night like this that this Imam who had dedicated his life helping the Muslims, helping the community, helping the Christians of society, the Jews of society, the orphans of society, the widows of society, every single individual of society. This Ali ibn Abi Talib, he has been struck by Abdurrahman ibn Muljam, and the blood has seeped through the body of Amir al Mu'mineen. And now that the blood has seeped through the body of Amir al Mu'mineen, we are told that his skin has become yellow. The poison has turned his skin yellow, and there's only a few moments of life left on this planet. We are told Amir al Mu'mineen, he calls Imam al Hassan, he calls Imam al Hussein, he calls Sayyida Zainab, he calls all of his children, and he begins to look at them one by one, and he begins to pray, and he says, may Allah protect you, may Allah take care of you, may Allah look after you, may Allah be your guardian, may Allah be your protector. And he begins to say to Imam Hassan alayhi salam his wasiyah and his will, and he begins to say, my son Hassan, and my son, make sure that Allah fil aitam, make sure you look after the orphans, do not neglect the orphans. He's telling us, he says, Allah fil masakin, make sure you look after the poor, make sure you look after those who do not have income, make sure that they have a right over you, look after them. He continues and he says, my son, do not neglect the pages of history. I learned from the pages of history as if it was that I was walking amongst the ruins of past civilizations and past societies, as if he's saying, you also learn from the pages of history because they repeat themselves, for example. And he continues up until the point that at some point he would say, and he would speak to himself, that this is the night, this is the day, this is the one, and this is the moment. And he says, Hada Rasulallah, Hada Hamza. He says, this is Rasulallah who I see in front of me. This is Hamza who I see in front of me. These are the people who have come to bring me Ja'far al-Tayyar. These are the people who have come to bring me and take me with them towards Jannah. They have come to greet me. At that point in time, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he begins to, we are told his holy soul departs towards the heavens, and there is a cry, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. The orphans of the city of Kufa, they begin to weep when they hear the news. They say, our father Abul Hassan, the father of the orphans, who will look after us, who will take care of us, who will feed us, who will play with us after you are gone, who will care for us after you're gone. Ajrukum ala Allah, ajrukum ala Allah. Final narration, we're told that Imam Hassan and Imam al-Hussein, they take the body and from the back, and they take the body of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen towards the grave. Jibreel and Mikael are at the front. They get to the grave. They bury Amir al-Mu'mineen. When they bury Amir al-Mu'mineen, on their way back, they see an old man. Some say he lost his eyesight. He began to cry. He began to weep. They were hearing him. They said, oh man, what is the problem? What is the issue? why do you cry? Why do you weep? He said, it's been 3 days. I have not eaten. I used to have a friend. I used to have a muhsin, a person who used to take care of me. He said, what would he say? Who was this person? He says that he would feed me every day. He would look after me. And when I would ask, who are you? What's your name? He would say, it is just a poor one sitting with a poor one. It is just someone like you sitting with someone like you. But he was not someone like me. He was much greater than me. It's been 3 days. I have not had anything to eat. At that point in time, Imam Hassan and Hussein began to cry. They said, that is our father, Abu al-Hasan Amir al-Mu'mineen. We have just returned from burying him into the ground. And now that we have buried him into the ground, he has departed this world. He has departed this worldly abode. That man began to cry so much. He said, take me onto the grave of Abu al-Hasan, of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Take me onto the grave of the one who used to feed me with his own hands, who used to look after me when no one looked after me. They took him to the grave of Abu al-Hasan Amir al-Mu'mineen. He fell onto the grave of Abu al-Hasan Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib. He began to cry so much. He said, who will look after me after you? Who will take care of me after you? You were the one friend I had on this world. They say that he cried so much that he perhaps expired in that state. أجركم على Allah. The final thing that I will say, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, 1,000 salams on you. You got ghusl, you got kafan from the Imams themselves. You were buried into the ground. The ones who loved you, they were able to come, and even your neighbors and friends and companions were able to fall onto your grave. But come to Karbala, 3 days. Your son Hussein ibn Ali, no ghusl, no kafan. His ghusl is his own blood, and his kafan is the dust of Karbala. And when his daughter wants to come to the grave, there is a strike on her face from Shimr bin Dhil Jawshan. Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, you are buried with all the honor and prestige. But on the night of Ashura, what went over your grave? They say on the grave of your son Hussein, what went? Perhaps someone brought flowers on your grave, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Do you want to know what went over the body of Hussein ibn Ali? The hooves of the horses began to trample over the body of Aba Abdullah. Imam Sajjad says, Jabir, I heard the bones of my father breaking beneath the hooves of the horses. And Jabir, do you know what it's like for a son to hear the bones of his father breaking? ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. صلى الله عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. صلى الله عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. اللهم لعن قتلة الأمير المؤمنين.